Persona Q2 is the latest first-person dungeon crawler in the Megami Tensei series of RPGs, a crossover between the latest and certainly not the greatest Persona games. In this video, I will showcase that you can beat Persona Q2 with only LGBT characters. The rules are simple, but for clarification, here's some text explaining what is allowed. If you think the rules aren't strict enough, I implore you to do this run with harsher limits. I'd love to see what you come up with. To start, we named Joker Tatsusu, perhaps after the previous Joker, or perhaps after the Innocent Sin protagonist, who knows. We watched the Persona 5 cast prepare for the monthly stamp farming and mementos before finishing Sei's Palace, and ended up Isekai to a movie theater. The first movie, and therefore dungeon of the run, is Kamoshida Man. It's just Man of Steel but with a reverse lead actor. The dungeon itself is designed to get you used to basic navigation, puzzle solving, and avoiding optional mini-boss enemies known as FOEs. The tutorial fights on the first floor are fairly easy, so I'll explain the one character I can use so far. Due to negotiation options where Joker can say he likes men in addition to the numerous women he can form a sexual romantic relationship with, Joker is bisexual and therefore allowed in this run. Yeah, I'm not going to be so lenient with other characters, but Joker is also mandatory were I to play risky, so I have to use Joker regardless. He's a fairly standard character, though having access to a sleep skill, a skill that gets stronger while boost is active, and a cheap crit rate boost makes his base kit rather useful throughout the run. Once we reach the second floor, we gain access to Sub-Persona and can now remove characters from the party. Sub-Persona grant you up to 6 skills and an amount of HP and SP that regenerates between battles. The first Sub-Persona you get is Pixie. Pixie comes with Dormina, so she'll be essential for early game due to access to sleep. More Sub-Persona can be obtained randomly by finishing battles, with chances increased for each character in boost mode. While alone, Joker will have to rely on inflicting sleep in order to survive, and trips back to the theater will be common. The silver lining to this is that Joker will level fast since he's not sharing XP with anyone. A real thin lining given near every encounter in the dungeon will wipe unleveled Joker even on normal. I recommend you grind off basalt enemies that spawn from treasure spots on floor 2 until you're level 6, then Cowardly Maya enemies on the first floor until level 9, and then top off with the randoms of floor 2. After slipping through some FOEs, we get another tutorial fight. This one unlocks navigator skills, which again I've decided against since none of the navigators are any form of LGBT. After many attempts at many levels, I end up grinding to level 12 and get a run where I succeed in a Dormina gambling strat, beating the navigator tutorial as a result. Shortly after the fight, floor 2 is done and 3 starts with another tutorial fight. Before entering floor 3, make sure you grab the Endurance essay from the gold chest on floor 2. In general, you should unlock all of these chests as they contain useful stuff. We get introduced to the Persona 3 female protagonist in a cutscene, then the Affinity Barrier tutorial fight starts. Affinity Barriers are an underused mechanic that grants an enemy resistances until they hit half health. The fight is meant to teach you to use poison on enemies with an Affinity Barrier to break it, but since I don't have that, I chip the tank with Dream Needle. Oh, and make sure to brick the cop first. For beating this fight, we get our next party member of the run, the Persona 3 female protagonist who I named Candace Dixfit. For the sake of the vid, I will refer to her as Katone. Due to her dates with Elizabeth ending in sex and retaining the infamous neck clit scene in the I Guess social link alongside her male romance options, Katone is bisexual, thus qualified for the party. As a unit, Katone's role is to get the most out of the link skills. Link skills tag an enemy to receive further attacks whenever they receive an attack from any source. With proper setup, this can easily destroy FOEs and bosses later on. Katone, despite joining at less than half of Joker's level, makes encounters significantly easier just by being there and opening up options such as positioning and all-out attack, allowing me to clear the 3rd floor with few issues. I was scared when I had to go to the 4th floor for plot, but thankfully the condition of the fight was merely to survive. I really like Katone's characterization in this. Like, holy crap, she just knocked out a guard with her bare hands. Almost makes you forget there's not much difference between her and Kamoshida. Though there isn't much difference between the average Persona fan and Kamoshida either, if you ask me. After getting to finish the 3rd floor with minimal effort, I attempt Kamoshida Man for real. Preemptive shout out to the boss theme, Nothing is Promised. Great song as always from Lotus Juice. Kamoshida Man's first phase is a glorified cutscene, but Kamoshida Man's second phase does not F around. Kamoshida Man is weak to fire, but has an affinity barrier up until you destroy both carrots or get him under half health. Said carrots use hard-hitting physical attacks while Kamishita Man does nothing or tries to inflict sleep. Do note, destroying the carrots makes Kamishita tougher, so I opt for the latter strat. I won the fight with Joker at level 23. The grain itself ain't too bad at this point. If you can enter the fight with healing on both characters, then great. My winning strategy is to have Joker guard in front to tank the right carrot and have Katone chip the left carrot from the back while Sprinkly and heals. If you have enough SP for a couple poisons after destroying the left carrot, you basically won. For winning, we get a growth incense to get Katone on Joker's level, and it's on to the next dungeon. Before the second dungeon, the game takes some time pumping the Python to the idea of having a conformity bad theme, which is really hard to take seriously given the Persona's series earned reputation of being homophobic. Then we watch a trailer for Gymnastic Land. It's just snoot game. I don't get why 4chan thought the character design of Goodbye Volcano High was worth salvaging enough for 2 VNs and now a film, but I guess shit taste is the condition of the straight fur. We blaze through the first floor and its minimally threatening encounters, including one where we unlock Baton Pass, the only support skill I would be using. Baton Pass in Q2 allows you to transfer boost between characters for some otherwise unused party gauge. Pretty useful for this run. Our reward for clearing this floor is meeting the Persona Forecast, who, much like their game, are shit. Also, shoutouts to Teddy and Rise's Japanese voices. They're almost as grating as their characters. Now personally confirming I can't unequip navigators, I will add in that I cannot switch to Rise due to her not only being cishet but also homophobic. Not that her auto skills are any good, or her active skills for that matter. I'm also switching the Navi voice to Elizabeth given the previously mentioned has had sex with Katone. Street Pass functions unlocked, but I'm playing the PC port so I can't really use it. If you're an improved hardware, highly recommend getting the Net Pass app so you can Street Pass without leaving the comforts of your home. Second floor is nothing of note until the end. Special screenings unlocked during it. This game's side quest system and where the bulk of optional character interaction and playtime lies. While these quests strongly encourage fielding specific characters, you can ignore the cast for the most part. On the third floor, blank cards also unlocked, being a rebalanced version of Persona Q's skill card system. Rebalanced in the sense that they allow you to modify sub-Persona skills, but require a much more rare variant to modify main Persona skills, and are tied to sacrifice fusions, which are also rebalanced, so now they cost money. There's also been the whole Yosuke Source plotline, but it's hard to take seriously given it's Yosuke. Early into the fourth floor, we have a mandatory unison attack tutorial. Despite forcing the band you into the party, the battle is a glorified cutscene, seeing as I have no control and gain no experience, so it doesn't count. These glorified cutscenes also appear in the screenings that unlock said unison attacks, but since they're optional, I won't be doing the screenings. So no Ultimate Persona this run since I can't do the screenings to unlock, well, Ultimate Persona. The rest of the fourth floor is decent puzzling and some rather threatening rare shadows. Yosuke, baby girl. That's not true. People don't just hate you for being a nepo baby. People also hate you because you're homophobic and a sex pest. Before attempting Yosuke Saurus, I do Joker's Sudi film screening. This fight is hard and it took many attempts, but with Healing Hand boosted Medea from Lenon Shide, it's tolerable. This unlocks triple fusion, opening up many arcana worth of Persona, including Turdak of Judgment, who can be sacrificed to grant Persona the Death Chaser skill. Death Chaser is a core component of Link builds, applying a buff that makes the user attack all hit enemies when an ally in their row uses an attack. This attack activates Link attacks, potentially adding up to a dead enemy. I'm hoping this can be a core strategy going forward. I also intend on using DLC Persona more past this point, such as Izanagi Picaro to get combo arts plus to further Link attacks, and Ariana Picaro as Joker's main sub-persona due to her accessible Omnibind. Neither of these Persona are their offering stick, mind you. I do a Yosuke Source attempt that dies quickly in its grind time. Yosuke Source is a rather nasty boss, punishing Tsukukaja dispelling with better Tsukukaja, hitting with good wind attacks, confusing my party with Tentarafu, and having rather meaty allies. Thankfully he's susceptible to agility, bind, and poison, and the win condition is just beating said allies. So I grind to level 42, got Death Chaser on my characters, got Ariana Picaro, somewhat built for Joker, got no confusion on Katone's Ose, and attempted Yosuke Saurus again. Ariana didn't matter much, but Death Needle and Null Confusion basically won the fight. There's a follow-up fight with an FOE afterwards, but you just need to survive a couple of turns and she's weakened. With that done, the worst movie in the game is done. Unfortunate that Hikari liked it. Probably hate it less if it didn't have the Yosuke meat writing, to be honest. I fucking hate Yosuke, man. At least there wasn't a detransitioning plotline like my opening joke to this dungeon could have implied. We'd have to wait for Kasumi's arc in 5 Royal for anything like that. The third dungeon of the game takes place in a sci-fi movie called Aegis, set in a horrifying post-human future in which robots took over and based their society off of Japan. On the first floor, we recruit most of the Persona 3 cast, who, while I tolerate them, are not allowed in this run, as tempting as it would be to argue that Koromaru is asexual and therefore run legal. I will be switching my navigator to Fuka mostly because I can. If her late game interactions with Mitsuru and Femsirad are any indicator, she's still more run qualified than Futaba. Most of my experience with the first floor is dying and fleeing because the enemies are tough enough to remind me I actually need various AoE elemental spells. This dungeon also introduces rare enemies who use insta-kill spells. Until mandatory encounters start getting impossible, I'll keep running. Thankfully the FOEs you have to kill are doable. I do fuse Ose into a Berserker in the meantime to give Katone Shiratense, a buff mandatory for old DPS strats. Floor 2 is more floor 1, but there's a mandatory encounter with 4 UIYs halfway through you'll want a little strategy for. And by that, poison and binds mainly. Why I'm trying to rush this floor will become apparent soon. Early into floor 3 is another mandatory encounter with 2 UIYs and a KNS 1000. This will be a battle of attrition, but I got lucky on my first attempt. Our reward for this is the last 2 characters who join your party. The male Persona 3 protagonist, Brad, who I can't use because he's fucking straight. Shout out to Reload for doing fuck all and not letting him romance Akihiko. And I guess our last party member. Because of the previously mentioned has had sex with Katone and has had sex with Makoto, Aegis is bisexual. Aegis is a tank, gaining skills that let her reduce or nullify damage allies in her row take. She can also be made into a powerful boss slayer thanks to Orgia mode. I intend to give her Orpheus Picaro so she can use Healing Harp to make sure Tensei strats last more than a turn, because Yahweh forbid I actually change my strategies for a new game. However, that will be a bit since I want to get immunity buffer first. Having an extra body means links can last longer, all-out attacks do more damage, and I can all-out attack more diverse mobs. Returning to the third floor after that explanation, and oh shit, there's enemies that petrify, and warp panels. What is this? Sector Aridinus? Okay, it's not that bad. One of the rare benefits of Etrian's manual map charting is warp puzzles don't get to be confusing since you can just link what warps are linked to. I'd still take a normal fucking auto map, but much like decent gay romances, Persona refuses to have much in the way of nice things. Fourth floor is more of the same, but now I have an Orpheus Picaro. Holy shit, why did I put idle hands on this thing? I thought they nerfed Healing Harp strength. It's still a full heal. I will still be using this going forward. If you don't like that, I'm using broken stuff, dislike the video, leave a comment telling me how bad I am at Persona, and unsubscribe. Only thing of note in the fourth floor is a mandatory encounter with Akutsuki. However, you only need to defeat him and he's not much stronger than the KNS 1000 he summons. After a brief map cleanup, I fight the mother computer at level 50. A clear Yahweh knockoff, this boss is a test of your ability to sustain and hit any element on a dime. Primarily in the second phase where Futaba calls out the element you must hit in order to make the boss vulnerable. Orpheus Picaro is the obvious solution, however the treasure map in the dungeon gets you the ability to buy soul drops so you can fuel repeated idle hand boost at Medea's if you really want to challenge yourself. For a longer, more conformist strat, you could probably just give Aegis a sub-persona with immunity buffer, resist Elec and regenerate 2, stick her in the front and set her on guard while Joker and Katone chip mother computer, tossing the occasional called for elemental item from the back. With that fight done, it's on to more story I'm not really covering and the best dungeon. Starting this dungeon off, we get a trailer for what seems to be the average Hollywood animation. Okay, I'm kidding, DreamWorks doesn't do musicals anymore. This dungeon, whose name remains scratched out, is one with a rather deceptive floor count, giving you essentially explore 2 floors at a time. Kinda like Q1's Clock Tower, but not at the end of the game. This is also the point where you could say the story kicks in, tying in the imagery and themes of the prior dungeons to the OC Donut Steel Hikari's life experiences and struggles. Like, yeah, I personally get what the game is going for given my own life experiences as someone who is gay, has autism, and is currently on Sertraline, but let's be real here, the writers would absolutely start saying, conformist culture destruction of individuality is good actually, with no irony if this were about Hikari being gay or trans, instead of just her enjoying movies and having a basic moral compass. As for the encounters of this dungeon, they're pretty easy once you get Sleep Circle and Ailment Arts on Joker. At the end of the first pair of floors, we get a musical number explaining the imagery behind Kamoshida Man. Following that is a mandatory encounter that teaches me Healing Harp doesn't work on turns I use move. By that, the encounter outsped me and uses Bless and Elect skills, which the party is still weak to. Lost a good amount of progress to that death even. Second attempt went better, mostly because Joker got a lucky crit I could baton pass onto Aegis, so Healing Harp is up. As for damage, the idol is weak to poison, so use Death Needle of course. The rest of the dungeon is more the same with 2 more pairs of floors to crawl through. At the end of the second pair is another musical number, this time contextualizing Genetic Land, and then another mandatory encounter. One that's just a glorified random encounter at this point, so I'm not going to cover it. Third pair introduces probably the best FOE design in the game. Just some dwarves strapped to the fucking gills. Otherwise nothing special on this floor. The musical number wrapping up this pair ties into Aegis and features an encounter with enemies weak to nukes, so pretty easy. Also, while I find no use in them, stat reversal items can be obtained after getting the treasure map. Said items modify stat growth in Q2 because Q2 has to have some exploits if it's going to be anything like the first game. Floor 7 is just a boss that's essentially a check for sustain and electric link since they're immune to every good ailment. Naturally, my lazy ass checked the boss to death because I didn't have the elements it's weak to and they're resistant to everything else. Purifying Salt helps here since it always uses Bestial Roar when it doesn't have the buff up. Floor 8 is Do, who is revealed to be Hikari's shadow and the boss of this dungeon. For the fight, Do turns into what I imagine the average RPG fan to look like and puts up a fight like you're in an argument about how their favorite game is homophobic and therefore irredeemably shit. The first phase is basically a check for physical DPS as you must destroy the eye, which is immune to all but physical and almighty, to open up the main body for damage, which is weak to ice, force, electric, and bless. Joker's Rebel Vanguard is useful for getting boosts here. Naturally, my lazy ass took forever on this phase the first time around. The second phase is where the fan hits the shit. Since Hikari is not LGBT, we can't use Hikari's cheer to cure the Omnibind Do uses. Said Omnibind cannot be immunized against or cured by means other than death. Thankfully, you can use items and revival beads are purchasable at this point, so in theory it should be possible. Theory being the key word here. Such as in theory, I also thought my link chain fully carried into phase 2. However, in practice, after boosting Katoni to 70 through persona sacrificing for infinite link, while the link continues into phase 2 as do any Death Chaser procs, all active commands that turn get cancelled. My winning attempt happened after fusing Siegfried with the useful link skills and using Dragon Cry instead of Death Chaser on Katoni, as my test attempt was also subject to the level difference penalty to damage you have when equipping a sub-persona over 6 levels different from the character. My winning attempt also skipped unlocking Hikari's cheer due to beating Do so fast. Following Do's defeat and Hikari becoming confident once more, Nagi reveals herself to be this game's unfortunate random deity turned into Persona final boss Enlil, and we make pursuit in the next and final dungeon, the Theater District, a place ran by Enlil where the depressed and ostracized go to watch shitty movies to escape from reality. Can't blame him honestly. The dungeon itself is basic, mostly being notable for its shorter length than the previous dungeon and for being where you can get some real good stuff like the materials for ultimate equipment from the FOEs. Speaking of which, for casual playthroughs, this is the main reason to hunt every FOE, as that's how you unlock every ultimate equipment. Said FOEs are pretty basic, and by that they're susceptible to bites, so open with your favorite personal choice of Omni or at least Agility Bite and let it rip with your preferred DPS option. Do delay a bit on slaying Funbabas though, as you need to bait them near rubble to clear the dungeon. Even less floor by floor commentary this time, it should say a lot that floor 2 isn't started by a story event. Not helped by the store selling repulse horns and me not needing anything from random encounters as ultimate equipment is right around the corner. The fourth and effectively final floor has some stuff worth noting though, such as the Reaper fight and the treasure chest containing the main item needed to buy ultimate equipment, the Akashic Record. The Reaper himself is fairly tried, essentially being the Namtaru FOE but without elemental weakness, resistance, and only susceptible to Agility Bind. On the boss floor, there's 5 mandatory encounters you must fight before Enlil. Thankfully not all in a row unless you want to. The first is just some shadows, and the other 4 are simplified refights against the previous dungeon bosses. Simplified in that you don't engage with their mechanics or go through multiple phases. All of these fights are a matter of whatever strategy you normally use to slay FOEs. I've primarily been using a link setup on Katone, but sure, Tensei or Gia mode and Dragoncry can make Aigis delete bosses, especially with physical attacks such as Aeon Rain or Hasotobi. This will be relevant especially in the next fight. At the end we fight Enlil. This fight is surprisingly really hard. I really recommend switching to Aigis as your boss slayer at this point and to stop using Orpheus Picaro as your healer if you still are. I didn't do that on my first attempt. The first phase is easy enough, thus not worth talking about. The second phase is immune to ailments and binds, constantly changes her weakness, and responds to buffs lasting more than a turn with Dekaja like she's Nocturne Lucifer. So naturally, given my setup is based around removable buffs, I lost. Between attempts, I grind a bit on the floor 4 FOEs to get money for Velvet Room stuff. For my second attempt, I grind to level 78, fuse an Ishtar to be my healer and fuse Yoshitsune, equip him to Aigis and give Enlil another try. This try falls apart with Enlil landing confusion on Aigis, me not having ailment removal items, Hasotobi missing, and the inherently self-terminating nature of trying to combine Shiro Tensei and Gia mode without passive healing or endure. For my third and final attempt, I hit level 79, skill card Dragoncry onto Yoshitsune, Endure onto Aigis, and replace Aigis Dragoncry accessory for an accuracy booster. This attempt had some hiccups, but the strategy worked after about 4 Hasotobis. After phase 2 is a scripted event, and yes, the Hikari Navi skills and unison attack you use are mandatory, thus beating Enlil. Everyone says their goodbyes, the credits roll, we get a post-credits scene where the P5 cast watch a movie made by Hikari. Thus, it's been proven that yes, you can beat Persona Q2 with only LGBT characters. You can even break the game. What did I think of the game overall? It's okay. The visuals are solid, music is a mixed bag for me, the dungeon themes outside of the last 2 are meh, I don't like Invitation for Freedom, and Pull the Trigger is mainly good because of the Lotus Juice parts. Nothing is promised is great though. The combat is pretty good, the mechanics are cohesive, have a unique identity from other Megaten titles, the bosses pose an interesting challenge, and it's just plain fun before endgame fatigue sets in. For better and for worse, the dungeon design is forgettable. The writing is also mixed for me. The themes are good and all, but the writing suffers from a case of heartbreaking. Worst person you know makes a great point. Experiencing these characters in the Japanese dub for the first time was certainly an experience. It's definitely designed for people who've never played a first-person dungeon crawler. I recommend it if you want a Persona game that poses a challenge that isn't Eternal Punishment PS1. To get into dungeon crawlers but don't want to do a strange journey's far better but harsher dungeon design yet, or to experience what the Persona series has wrought in the wake of 5's massive success. Going forward, I have no idea. Making this video was a new experience for me. I'm thinking maybe my next run could be Tales of the Abyss with only spells.